Hi everyone, we're going to get the webinar started. I just want to welcome everyone to today's session. We are covering on Windows 7. My name is Amber Mata. I will be your moderator. I am the marketing manager here at Cybersecurity, and I'm very excited for you to hear everything today. For those of you who haven't really joined us before, we are Cybersecurity. We are a managed security service provider, which means that we are dedicated to providing SMBs and nonprofit organizations and protecting them from cyber threats, as well as helping them comply with the latest cybersecurity regulatory requirements. Sorry, I forgot to click there. During this session, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, which I'm hoping that is pointing directly to. So if you have any questions or comments during the session, please feel free to utilize the button. We would love to hear anything you have for us to either comment on or question, and we will address that all at the end. The messages will get sent directly to me and Bob, so we will answer those for you separately at the end. Also, if you submitted any questions yesterday via email or social media, we will also be able to address those at the end as well. Of course, I don't know if you can see in the top left-hand corner, we are recording this, so this will be posted on our YouTube channel by the end of the day, which, as you can see on here, we also have other social media outlets, and our other webinars are posted on there as well if you haven't had the chance to look at those. So I'm going to use this little spiel as marketing manager to get some exposure to our other social sites. We have a really cool upcoming social media story coming up. So make sure you're following us to get caught up on that. And finally, the reason you're here today, I would like to introduce Bob Thomas. He wears many hats here at Kyber, but officially he is our vCIO and vCISO, which he will explain what those acronyms mean to you. He's going to talk about the new Microsoft update and how it will affect the security of your network, and he's also going to address some other things to be proactive with your infrastructure upgrades. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much, Amber. So my name is Bob Thomas. I'm one of the owners here at Cybersecurity. As Amber said, I'm both the vCIO, which is Chief Information Officer, and Virtual Chief Information Security Officer. The term virtual isn't because I'm sitting behind a curtain someplace. It's more along the lines of I'm at my client's disposal to perform those tasks. So we do a lot of work in the security space, obviously, based on the name Cybersecurity, and some of those things are helping, as Amber said, with compliance. Department of Defense contractors need help basically filling out questionnaires that they're getting from their either vendor suppliers or their clients. That's one of the things that we're getting increasingly involved with, since we actually had a client of ours. They got cut off from getting any purchase orders from one of their suppliers or from one of their clients only because they hadn't completed questionnaires and they needed our assistance, and they forwarded those to us and we got them done for them. So it's one of the things that I do as Virtual Chief Information Security Officer here. One of the things that I want to talk about to kind of get this kicked off is why the hackers are doing what they're doing, how are they penetrating people's networks, and then we're going to get into how the different operating systems stay protected and the best methods to use in order to protect yourself from getting hacked. So just so everybody's on the same page, definition of a hacker, I thought probably everybody knows this, it's probably obvious, but just so we're in agreement, because this is key to today's discussion, we're talking about somebody or a group of people that are looking to gain unauthorized access. That's key, obviously, to this whole thing, to someone's software and or their hardware. And they're trying to do this, as the line on the screen says, they're trying to infiltrate organizations en masse. They are typically not targeting a specific company. And I could come up with a couple of scenarios and examples where that's not true, and I'll talk about that in a few slides. But the norm is that they are trying to easily find a place to penetrate a network to get information. And obviously, you want to know, why are they trying to get into my network? What's so special about my network? And there's typically three options that they're pursuing in trying to get access to a network that they don't have credentials to gain access to. They're trying to get data. And it may not be necessarily what people would term intellectual property, where it's patented data or it's engineering information that could be useful to them for sale on the black market. But I think the real target is trying to get usernames and passwords, because if they can get that, they can not only maneuver around your network, but they can use it to try to infiltrate other networks. They can try it. They can try getting access to somebody's banking information. That's an incredibly common thing to do. You look at the big Equifax attack that occurred back in 2017. They weren't necessarily just looking to get into Equifax to say they did it. Equifax holds the keys to the kingdom for everybody's personally identifiable information. We've got social security numbers, we've got obviously names, addresses, city, state, zip, phone numbers, all kinds of information. And then there are probably user identity pieces, logins, usernames, and passwords that are then in turn taken and sold to folks on the dark web. And those people take that information and in turn resell it to others so that they can hack someone's network. So I think that getting data out of somebody's system is probably one key way that the hacker is trying their hardest to get in. Another piece is they want money. The latest trends show ransomware is not going away, where they hack somebody's network. In a very easy method, they send out broadcast emails. They get somebody to click on an email because it looks authentic, but it's really not. They click on the attachment. They click on the link that's in it. Boom, a piece of software gets deployed onto that machine, and they can track exactly what you're typing using keyloggers, or it can deploy a program and sit there for hours, days, weeks, months, and then at some future time, we'll kick off and send information directly to them from your network. Obviously, part of that is they can encrypt data while they've got themselves onto your network. That one little click that a user from your company performs, it could trigger a chain reaction of not just encrypting all the data that's on their machine, but more importantly, any other machines and map drives or access that person has. They've got a shared drive on your server. In a matter of minutes, it can encrypt every single one of the files on your server, so you no longer have access to the information. At that point, they hold you hostage. They set a price for what they think the value of that data is, and they say you've got 72 hours to give us that money in Bitcoin format. And if you don't, we're going to throw away the encryption key and you'll never get access to your data. Obviously, backups become very important if you want to avoid paying the ransom. And obviously, I think this is probably clear. Number 3 on the option list, they want to ruin your business. And if you picture where these people are from, they're usually not from the United States. They're from third world countries and people that are not friendly with the United States. And they make their mission and their business to ruin other people's reputation and businesses. So they're really not hand-picking a particular company. It says it doesn't matter the size of the company. That's absolutely true. They're broadcasting out a program, a piece of computer code, and trying to find a hole in someone's network. That's really their objective and their mission at the end of the day. I mentioned that you get these emails. Phishing is kind of it's kind of a generic way of trying to get you to do something. They send over an email that maybe has an attachment in it and the notes in it say, here's your tracking number. Well, that's not exactly a targeted attack because they don't really know that you shipped something or that you were expecting tracking information. That's kind of a broadcast. But spear phishing is truly targeted at folks that might very well be inclined to click and follow the link or open the attachment in a particular email or message. Probably the most common is the whole W-2 scam that usually comes out around the beginning of the year, where the owner of a company or somebody in finance makes a request to the owner and says, hey, can you send me the copy of those W-2s? I need them for a financial report I'm doing. Oh, okay. And we've had people come very close to following that, even if the person's in the next office and it looks like it's coming from them because their name and email address has been spoofed, it's been copied and used. And all of a sudden, all of the information contained in those could be out in the wild. Those are the types of things that happen. And in clicking, it could also create that, that anonymous program running on your machine, feeding information out to the bad guys. And, not having a firewall, that makes you a very easy target. Using the generic default usernames and passwords on devices, switches, firewalls, routers, those things, they will make you the easiest target. They'll find you, they'll put in the credentials, they'll be inside your network and you won't even know it. And you have to, when it comes to firewalls, it's just like any computer. It needs to be constantly updated. Code rolls out every 2 to 3 months on those devices. If you don't keep them up to date, they will be not dumb devices, but they will not be as intelligent as they need to be in order to keep the bad guys out. One of the reasons we're having this webinar today and talking about all these things is why is Windows 7 going to become a problem? And now that last screen talks about where this is history repeating itself. Microsoft announced, hey, Windows XP is going into life. That was back in 2015, 2014, 5 years ago. Yeah, there's still people out there running XP. There's been no security updates. Those are easy targets for folks. What's going to happen, as this suggests on the screen, Windows 7 is going to run up against the same exact problem. We've got Windows 7 has been end of sale for years now. You see the date up there, October 31st, 2016. That was the date that Microsoft made an announcement across the board that they were no longer going to ship or allow the major manufacturers of computers to ship out Windows 7 on new computers. They have since made the announcement that the final day that they will support Windows 7, and I'll go into what support really means, is January 14th of next year. So we're talking about 8 months out. They will no longer be supporting it, meaning they won't take phone calls and discuss issues with it. But that's really the tip of the iceberg. The more important thing is they're not going to issue out updates. The second Tuesday every month is called Patch Tuesday for a reason. Microsoft finds the most vulnerable issues with the operating system and their browser. They create fixes for it. They announce it. It's given out at a specific time, and it's automatically released to the public. That process will no longer exist for Windows 7 after that January 14th date. What does this mean to you? No longer receiving critical updates, patches, bug fixes, any of those things to keep the hackers at bay will no longer apply to the Windows 7 operating system. So that's probably the most critical thing to understand about this announcement and why Windows 7 is no longer going to be a secure operating system. We've gotten some questions around this, what the lifespan of an operating system is. I think as time goes on, with almost everything Microsoft is developing, they're squeezing down the amount of time that they want to support old technology. If you look at what they've done with SQL Server, with Exchange Server, they only want to really support the current version and one version back. They've probably given a little leeway to supporting 2 versions back. They don't want to do that, and they're going to roll out versions faster as time goes on. typical lifespan for getting XP, which ran a course of, whatever, 13, 14 years, reality is 10 years is going to be a lifespan for an operating system. And we're very close to that. The Windows 10 was released in 2015. I think that one, and I'll go into this a little later, may actually make it significantly further than 10 years. But if you look, Windows 7 lasted 11 years. Windows 8, end of life and end of support date is January of 2023, which is right at 10 years. So I think that's what the target will be or should be going forward. Obviously, everybody wants to know, how does this affect me? What do we do? Are my applications going to be supported? How am I going to make myself secure and keep myself secure? As I've been saying, the whole idea of the hacker is to find the easy path in. If somebody's got a Windows XP machine that's on their network and is accessible from the outside or accesses the internet on a regular basis, that's an easy target. I think going forward, starting next year, you will see Windows 7 be exactly the same mold. It will be an easy target for people because there will be vulnerabilities they will find every day, every week, every month, and people will find a path in using those vulnerabilities, usually in browsers. I think another thing we need to talk about, not just around security, but will my ISV, independent software vendor, will they support their application if I'm running, quote unquote, an unsupported operating system? Windows 7 will be unsupported. We've already heard from some software vendors that if the operating system is not on the supported list, their application will not be supported. That doesn't mean that it won't work, but if you have problems with it, they will not support it. They will not take your calls and work to resolve it on the Windows 7 operating system. They may even have a case on Windows 8 and 8.1, even though Microsoft supports it. It is an end of sale operating system where it is no longer being offered by anyone. There's that comment down the bottom, Windows 7 devices, and this has nothing to do with going forward starting next January. 7 devices are 3.4 times more likely to be hit by ransomware than Win 10. There is a lot of additional security measures that were built into Windows 10 at the operating system level, and not the least of which is encryption. That is a very important factor when it comes to securing not just your device, but the data that's contained inside it. So this further reinforces what I was just talking about. Imagine using a product that a company doesn't want to take responsibility for anymore. You're using a product and it is clearly at your own risk, meaning Microsoft is not going to take any responsibility for loss of data or a breach to your system when that clock ticks past January 14th of next year with respect to Windows 7. And I think, the whole idea that Microsoft has set a baseline as to what they want people to be using from an operating system level, and I think the independent software vendors are going to do the same exact thing. They may not do it in advance of that date, but I could very well see right after that they're going to say, hey, you need to be on one of these versions that's supported on Windows 10, and that's what they're going to strive for. That's probably the most pertinent message there. One of the things that I talked about on the previous slide was, what makes the operating system more secure? What's a good reason to move up to Windows 10? This is probably one of 8 different security features, but I think it's the most important. BitLocker is Microsoft's version of full whole disk encryption, where it will encrypt every single file and block of the hard drive. And unless you have the master password key to unlock it, when it boots the system will not come up and the data will not be accessible. That's a very, very big thing, especially if you have financial data, if you have medical data, if you're under some sort of compliance where you've got a laptop you're carrying around with data, you have to have that type of protection in place. This reluctance to change, I think that has probably been the reason that so many folks stayed on Windows XP for so long and didn't want to move to 7 or 8 at that point, and now 10. And I think the same thing has taken over now, where Windows 7 has become the standard. It's probably, I think that's 43 to 47% of the installed base of computers in businesses right now are running Windows 7. Windows 8, it's a negligible number. It's 5% or less, and the balance is Windows 10. People are running older applications. Maybe they won't run on Windows 10, never attempted to test and install them on 10, but they were very comfortable with the look and feel of Win 7. And I think the answer is you've got to look at Win 10. They've got some overlays on it that will make it, into quote unquote classic mode, where it will look and act a lot like Windows 7, and give you the extra security and longevity that you should be looking for. I'm going to post at the end, when we release this on our YouTube channel, there's also a link to a chart that will show you every operating system that Microsoft has rolled out in the last, I think it's 15 years, and which ones include the BitLocker automatically as a free tool, and ones that don't come with it. Okay, so you've chosen to make the move. How do I start this process? What do I do? Where do I go from here? I think the first thing you need to determine is, do I have a machine that has the horsepower and the guts to be able to run and work using the Windows 10 operating system? And we've got, on the next slide, you'll see the statistics that are necessary. But in advance of just guessing, there's a Windows 10 compatibility test that you can run. And it will not just test whether the machine will work, it will also look at the equipment that is attached to that machine. You've got a printer, a scanner, a camera, any sort of peripheral device that might be hooked onto. It could even be monitors, which sounds crazy, but some very high-end monitors, if they're older, may have an issue with the operating system and functioning properly. That compatibility test will give you a very good idea of, will the machine run? Will it run to your expectation? Do you have enough disk space? And then it will assess the peripherals and say, there's a driver for this to work, there's a driver for this to work. Microsoft never created a driver, and the manufacturer didn't either for this other. You're going to have to replace that item. And in some situations, do you need no equipment? I think another threshold is the machine under warranty? If you start changing operating systems and have a problem with the equipment, do you have the ability to call the manufacturer and say, hey, this piece of machinery is not working, I've got something broken in it, I've got a hard drive issue, are you going to be able to get it replaced, or have you just created an anchor by trying to upgrade that unit? I think knowing whether you've got warranty coverage on that, and for all of our clients, we have an asset management system, and we track warranties on every single piece of equipment that they own. We have that information at our fingertips, and we're now going through every single client, showing them that data and saying, okay, we've got to make a decision. Do we try to extend warranty on a device that's coming up, and we just did 7 of them this morning, or is this an opportunity to replace a, let's say, problematic machine, or a machine that is maybe a little long in the tooth? Those are the type of things that you have to think about. I'll talk about network segmentation in a second, but one other thing that you ought to know about that's going on in the marketplace right now, Intel made a very large mistake on estimating the demand for processors. And this goes back to last year, but it has finally caught up to them, and there are very few of their i5-based processors in the marketplace right now. And they're talking about not being able to catch up on production until sometime, it's looking like summer now, early summer, before they've got sufficient product in the pipeline to be able to deliver computers in what I would call the mid-range. There's low-end machines available, less than there were probably 2 months ago, because people are now picking those off as an alternative. And there's typically sufficient quantity available at the high end, i7 and Xeon processors. So just because you say, oh, well, I'm just going to go out and get new machines, those machines actually may not be available at this point in time and may not really be in the marketplace for another couple of months. So keep that piece in mind. The network segmentation thing is really a stopgap measure. We've determined that we need Windows 7 to run a specific, let's see, we've got somebody that runs a CNC shop floor, doing, let's say, wood cutting or metal cutting with computer numeric control machinery. And the software that's on that machine can only talk to Windows 7 or earlier. And we've got, I could probably come up with case study after case study of our existing clients that fall into this realm. The best answer for that is if there is not a reasonable upgrade. Maybe the company that wrote the software doesn't even exist anymore. Maybe they decided not to write an upgrade. You have to take that machinery and segment it off, cordon it off, so that it, number one, can't be seen by the rest of the network and other machines, and cannot see the internet. And obviously you don't want it to see the internet because you don't want the internet to see it as a vulnerable asset. I really think those are the most important machines to look at if you're going to try to hand-pick machines and say, yeah, we're not going to upgrade those machines to Win 10 because we just can't at this point in time. A very quick overview of the system requirements for Windows 10. Core i3 processor, 4 gigs of RAM. To be honest, we haven't sold a machine with 4 gigs of RAM in probably 3 or 4 years. Everything's been 8 gig. It's just the right thing to do to future-proof yourself and to make sure you're going to get the performance you expect. This is Microsoft spec, 60 gig minimum. That's a dangerous place. 60 gig means you're not running anything and installing anything on the machine because you're going to bump up against the maximum on that. 100 gig is probably the minimum reality. Here's some tips to remember.
Real quick, Bob, before,
yes.
Can you go back to that one slide? Because we do have one question about for the compatibility.
Sure.
Where can they access the compatibility checker?
I'm going to send a link to it out to everybody that's on this call.
Okay, cool.
So that they can do that.
Nice.
Yeah, sure. So some tips to remember. First thing, we went through this, Amber and I went through this presentation, and I've jumbled this up a little bit because I think the most important thing is, obviously you run computers to run a certain software application. You need to know if there's a Windows 10 version or compatibility issues with Windows 10 from your most important software vendors. I think those are the first people you need to talk to make sure that if you're running a version, and maybe it's not the most recent version, do they have something that is Win 10 compatible? That should be the starting place as you're trying to figure out exactly what to do and the order to do it in. Next, after that, there's different ways to attack this. And I think if you consult with your managed service provider or security partner, I think you talk to them. They should have, like somebody like myself, a virtual chief information officer that can help you and guide you and say, okay, look, here's all of your machines. Here are the ones that are under warranty. These have sufficient horsepower to run the application and the operating system. Maybe they could use a memory upgrade, and that's a worthy investment. Or we want to take those machines exactly as they are, upgrade them from 7 to 10, get you Windows 10 licensing, and bang, you're off and running. And in some circumstances, no reinstall of any applications. And then there's the last, let's say, the last ditch effort, full-on replacement of whatever equipment is running Win 7 or Win 8 today and moving it to Win 10. I think those are really the the logical progressions. Once you get to the place of upgrading, whether it be in-place upgrade or wipe and reload, backup, backup, backup. You've got to back up your data. Anything that's sitting local on that machine that you're going to mess with, you've got to have this stuff stored someplace else. There's some automated techniques that you can use during the upgrade process, but you've got to make sure that they work and that the data is going to be accessible after the upgrade. And obviously, it probably stands to reason. Change can be scary, but sometimes I agree. Sometimes it's for the better. A couple of other things just to talk about without getting into the independent software vendors of the world, which could be somebody like Timberline or Sage or QuickBooks. Let's go to Microsoft Office because the lion's share of the world runs it. And a couple of things that you ought to know about. When Office 2019 is available, just released, it's not under general availability everywhere, but it has been tested, alpha and beta, and it has been released. It will not install on either Windows 7 or Windows 8, or I suppose 8.1. It will only work on Windows 10. This is the start of how Microsoft gets people to a particular place, whether it be with their Office 365 product, where it's constantly being updated to the newest version, or with operating system. They want you on a standard and a supportable environment. They did the same exact thing with XP. As soon as they rolled out Office 2016, people started trying to install it on XP because it was the newest thing out. Won't install. Forget running it. You can't even install it to work. And it's the same thing with Office 2019. I did mention it, but it's on my screen, so I should tell you again. January 10th, 2023, that is the date that Windows 8 and 8.1 are end of support. That's already been determined by Microsoft. And we've gotten questions about, why should I upgrade to Windows 10? I should just wait till Windows 11 comes out because that's got to be due out any minute now. The answer is no. I did a lot of research on this. First of all, there will be no Windows 11. There will be potentially something called Windows 12, but Microsoft is actually doing something. They have all these code letters associated with this stuff, but they are making planned improvements and new feature releases to Windows 10, and they've got a bona fide schedule for it. In fact, April is the first big one that they just announced and just rolled out this week. There will be a May version. It will be much lighter. They've already planned for the 2020 version, which will be in either March or April. So if you can just think ahead, we're already out a year beyond now, and there's not even talk of whatever the next operating system is. The only discussion that has been in print about it, it will be virtual reality based or involved. And that's cool. Yeah, I know, that is cool. And it will no longer have username and password as the mandatory mechanism to log in. They're going to use biometrics or potentially some sort of code system, but it will be certainly usernames and passwords will not be the primary method of accessing the system and entering the system. I think those are the most important things to know when people start to ask questions, and I think we've even got one of these questions, why Windows 10? Isn't there another one coming out right on the heels of it? All the research says it's not. I don't think you will see some replacement, whether it's called Win 12, which they called it 12 because it represents a bridge of some sort, some stupidity that they came up with in marketing hype, I'm sure. Hey. But hey, but I don't see that happening based on what I'm reading and seeing until 2021 or 2022. I just don't think that's going to happen. They are going to build these, you want to call them feature packs or enhancement releases. That's what they are, and they're going to bundle. I'll give you a for instance as to the one that's coming either this month or next month. there's going to be a sandbox environment built into the operating system where if you want to install a piece of software but you have no idea as to what it will do or not do, or the harm it might do to your system, you can start this test environment on the operating system and load it into that little play area, if you will. That's how they're improving the operating system. You will see look and feel changes. They're trying to make the interface smoother, sexier. Those are other things that will continue to evolve, but I think those are the reasons they're spending development dollars on Win 10 instead of wholesale throwing it in the trash and going to a new completely new operating system with a different code name. I'm at a Q&A page. So
we actually kind of started the end of that.
Yeah.
So on the kind of same page of talking about upgrades and versions and all that, I have a few other questions kind of in the same realm, so I figured we can address those first.
Sure.
Some of them have to do, so one is, can I upgrade from Windows 8/8.1 to Windows 10 Professional? And then the other one is, can I upgrade from Windows 7 Home Edition to Windows 10 Professional?
Okay, so let's take the Windows 8 one first. I don't normally like to go in order, but I will. So if the 8/8.1 is the Pro version of the operating system, because they made Home, they made Pro, and they made Enterprise. If it's Pro or Enterprise, you can move directly up to Windows 10, and it will end up at a Windows 10 Pro, or if you're on Enterprise, it will go Enterprise to Enterprise. If it is Home Edition, and this applies to whether it's 7 or 8/8.1, you've got to first move up. If the mission is to get to the Professional Edition, you've got to move the operating system up from Home to Pro first before you do anything, which is a fairly easy process. And Microsoft has a mechanism for doing this. Windows Anytime Upgrade, Update, whatever they call that. But it is... Is
it another link that we can send out?
It's actually not a link. It's actually embedded in the operating system if you're a Home Edition user. It will be on the program list under Programs Accessories. So there's nothing to quote unquote buy out at the store or find a box someplace or order from Amazon. That's not how it works. If you want to go from Home to Pro, you fire off this Windows Anytime Upgrade, and it will bring you to Microsoft's site where you put in your credit card, you pay $99, I think the number is, and it will essentially unlock the features of the Professional version that are sitting on your machine already, but are not key coded to be able to operate until the product key matches the Pro operating system. 15, 20 minutes later, the machine reboots, and all of a sudden it's turned itself into Windows Pro. At that point, the machine is quote unquote ready to be able to move up from either 7 or 8/8.1 to 10, and it will end up at Pro.
Gotcha. So you guys, I'm learning too. We also have a bunch of questions in regards to cost, and I know we're running a little bit over on time, but because we had, I think, about 2 on cost, let's cover this. The first is, what is the cost to upgrade to Windows 10? So
if you've got Windows 7, in order to buy a license, and I checked this morning, the MSRP pricing is $199 to get a Windows 10 Professional license. There is no quote unquote upgrade license that you can buy. You can't buy the skinny down version that's $50 that turns Win 7 Pro into Win 10 Pro. There is only a full version product that will allow you to upgrade from one to the other. And you buy these. So businesses can have what's called a Microsoft Open License Agreement. It's an electronic licensing agreement that Microsoft has made available for literally decades now. And you have to buy, if you don't already have an agreement with them, you've got to buy 5 of something. It's a point-based system. And you buy 5, and that gets you an agreement number. And then, oh, you find another one needs to be upgraded after the 5. You can buy them one at a time for up to 2 years. And then the agreement either needs to be renewed or it will cancel, or I guess the words expire.
Okay.
So that's the license that's required to get from point A to point B.
Makes sense. The other cost question is in regards to nonprofits, actually. So it says, are there any free or low cost options for nonprofits?
Yes. So the same item that I should have looked this up. I didn't look at the pricing for this, but if you're a nonprofit and you're a member of TechSoup, which the website's TechSoup.org, you've got access to almost every single Microsoft either electronic product or full package product at, I wouldn't even call it a discount. It's essentially free plus I'll call it a handling fee, because it's really TechSoup's charge for running their website and handling the procurement and delivery of the licenses. So I'll throw out a number that's probably not the exact number, but it wouldn't shock me that instead of $200 for the license, it's $20 for the license, because that's it's usually in the family of 90% off. I've seen numbers even more dramatic than that, depending on the product, but most of the Microsoft stuff can be had that way for nonprofit. Now, you've got to make sure that your membership is active. If you've never applied as a member to TechSoup, there is an application process. You've got to give them a lot of financial data about your organization, because if your endowment is too large, you don't qualify. If it's education-based, they've got a couple of asterisks around that where you have to go to the academic licensing departments in order to get licensing that way, as opposed to using the TechSoup donation program. But if you're a bona fide 501c3, you've gone through the process of becoming a member of TechSoup, that should be your first avenue to look at for licensing. When it comes to whether it be operating systems, servers, Microsoft Office Suite, you're a nonprofit, you get free Office 365 email as part of that. You automatically get Exchange Online as part of it for free. All you have to do is apply for it.
You're just like all-knowing of all things. And then I'm just going to do...
I'm the licensing guy.
You are.
I'm the licensing police.
We're going to address one more question just because I really like this question. And then the rest of the questions that we won't be able to get to because we are really over on time, I will send with a follow-up email along with all the links or things that Bob has referenced in the webinar, probably by tomorrow. So the last question is, how would a hacker know if I have Windows 7 or Windows 10 on my computer? And this is in reference, I believe, to the beginning when you were talking about.
Let's see. I think the answer is really, I'm not so sure the answer is a definitive, they won't know. I think the answer is they don't care. Because that's not necessarily how they're writing programs to target individuals, companies, organizations. I'll give you a couple of scenarios here. Number one, they write a program and they start looking at internet addresses, IP addresses, and they tell the program, start at this address and sequentially increase that by 1 if you don't find what you're looking for. And what they're looking for is an open port and on your firewall, on your router, and they found one. It sends that information back and it says, okay, now we have a port, try to get in through that port. And it has a list of standard usernames and passwords. And it will just peck away using a brute force or dictionary attack where it just says, well, let's try admin and admin. Let's try admin and password. Let's try admin and password 1. and it will just start firing away, you know, tens of thousands of those per day for a single device until it says, I'm not getting in that way, let me move on. And the program automatically moves on to the next one and tries it again and again. If we're looking at it from the operating standpoint, if you've got Windows, let's say it's a year from now, Windows 7, and you're running Internet Explorer. Let's just assume that because it's Microsoft's also. And you're browsing the internet and there is a vulnerability that has been found and determined, you know, it could be common knowledge or it could have been unearthed by a hacker of some sort. He catches your browser on a particular site, boom, it will, in some circumstances, it will give them remote control to your machine and see exactly what you're doing, or allow them to completely control your machine. And all of a sudden your mouse is moving without you moving it. Your keyboard is actually being functioned by somebody remotely. That's the type of thing that can happen with an insecure operating system and the kind of peripheral applications that go along with it. I don't really think that they're trying to figure out who in the world is running Windows 7. I mean, they'd have to see into your network to be able to do that. And if they've already gotten to the point where they're inside your network, to be honest, they don't care what operating system is running on anything. Now they're looking for usernames and passwords. And this just happened to the largest managed service provider in the world in India, a company called Wipro. Somebody got in, they got the technician credentials, and they were dormant for probably a month to 2 months is the estimate right now, sitting there waiting to grab information. They grabbed it, then they started using it in the systems that the managed provider used to access their client systems and hacked 23 of their clients. And then, of course, they're in their client systems, and now it's, you know, it's a complete mess. That's a very nice way of putting it. So I really don't think the target is the operating system. The target is the vulnerability. That's really what they're after, is finding the hole, finding that needle in a haystack, and driving a truck through it.
Cool. Because we're over on time, the rest, as I mentioned, the rest of the questions I will put in our follow-up email. And thanks for attending, everyone. I hope you got some valuable information today. And thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Amber.